Cosmic here, welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be talking about the huge news we got over this past weekend for Union Arena with the full card list being spoiled. So yes, if you want to know what the changes are, spoiler, here they are, and we're going to talk about all of them. But also if you just want to have the chance to, print and play some proxy decks, get ready for the main set launch in just a few short weeks, and get a little early testing in, you now have the ability to. So shout out to both exburst.dev as well as Eggman Events have some deck builders live that you can go look at the cards, as well as print some ready decks to get ready, get battling. Now that said, there is quite a bit to talk about, so I will be going over my thoughts on the changes, as well as have a tier list at the very end of this video. But first and foremost, let's just dive into it and get the elephant out of the room. Yes, I still strongly believe that Bleach will be a tier 1 deck. Now, if you saw my previous video where I did give a Bleach list, I didn't want to just talk about the changes and not try to provide, an updated list, because I know this is one that a lot of people are going to be looking forward to. But the Orihime hit does absolutely make sense. So yes, both these cards are being removed. Orihime just having the 3K body and the chance to mill 2 as well. It just was a single card enabler for making sure that you got an extra turn of activation for the Ichigo or for the Bakuya to get the additional effects, right? It just provided too much value for the deck. Now, the one that did surprise me, if you go all the way back to my early video where I said, hey, there is no way in the world they will hit the raid fodder, which, spoiler, they did for the key raid target in the Bleach deck. So the Zero Rukia did get hit. And I know a lot of people are like, oh, on retire, it has a mill effect. No, this was literally just a raid target. 99 times out of 100, you didn't care about the actual effect of it. You just wanted to have a card that you could play early and then streamline into your raid target while still doing the level 3. So yes, both of these were considerable hits to the deck. However, Purple Bleach was so far away ahead in the Japan meta compared to any other deck in Bleach and Hunter x Hunter. I want to be absolutely clear. There was no contest for what the best deck of the format was going to be without these changes. Yes, I will say it is a little bit of a bummer to hit the Rukia fodder. However, that does bring up some interesting balancing choices that they could make in the future for other raid targets and cutting down the consistency, which is ultimately what this allows it to do. So the one thing I will say, when you're playing the Bleach deck and you're thinking about the activations, right? So 4 cards, always think about 4 cards in your graveyard or your sidelines, the thing that you want to be focused on, right? Because that is the number of cards you need to activate their key raid abilities. So with the Rukia raid, plus the effect of draw 3, bin 2, as well as having Rukia plus the raid target, a single Rukia raid is going to remove a threat, bin itself, and then by that alone gives you 4 cards because of the 2 off the discard, plus the raid and the fodder target itself, right? So the ability that it had to just automatically give you a free activation on the next turn was certainly strong, where at least with the Orihime, right, later on, it's not as strong because it's a 3K. Sometimes you can just block it. You are still going to get the immediate 2, which was obviously very strong in its own right. But one thing that you have to consider about, and you're going to see as a key theme as I'm talking through the rest of this video, you really want to find your late game threats that are strong when they come into play for your raid targets, and they cost 1 action point so that you can do raid fodder into raid into generally removal, or just even another play extender, right? Being that refreshing your energy line, be that playing something else to the front just so you have a blocker, whatever that might be, right? But having that third card played is a huge difference between some of the other 2 action point cards that we're going to talk about later on. So yes, for this shell, I think you do absolutely still want to consider running the 3 energy looter, because again, we just want to get more cards into our graveyard. It is a 3,500, which can feel a little bit bad, but at the same time, we have so many ways to shrink our opponent's cards by 500, which, spoiler, our color trigger is going to do that for us. And then the raid fodder, as I mentioned, or the raid target, is just so good for what you want to be doing anyway. So yes, you do have to cut back, I think, just from a consistency standpoint. Maybe you run a 3rd copy of Rukia, but I'll be totally honest. I didn't want to leave you guys with just no deck list to go off of. So this is much more cookie cutter, straightforward, Ichigo and Bakuya because you have extra removal, which is very important. And then you also have the impact to close out the game when you want to. So again, for at least for Bleach, having 8 removal cards plus a really good impact unit that can help swing the damage because you have all these 3 or 4Ks that you can then promote and force your opponent to block down and lose value, that is very strong. So again, I think these 2 raid values that we still have are very strong. I think you still have the Rukia. The thing I wasn't too sold on, and again, I just need to get to testing, is I know that Kisuke being the double energy is not something you actually want a 4 of, but I think just for players who are getting into the game and want a more streamlined experience and then can, tweak the numbers thereafter. And this is just for good future video reference. A lot of the videos that I will do will be a heavy focus on 4 ofs or 3 ofs where possible, just to give players a deck to start with, and it won't always make it to be the most refined version of it or the ultimate build, that's going to be seen later on in the format, right? I at least want to give a shell that you can work and build off of, because the one thing I will say is we probably do want to swap some of these numbers around. You still need a 2 cost. That's kind of like the other big thing is the 2 energy costs, so you can play them off of your color trigger to get an extra blocker is really important. It's kind of limited in that regard, so I was looking at some of the other 2 energies, and you probably want to do like a 2-2 split for the double energy versus the other 2 energy cards to play, so do keep that in mind. But again, just for the sake of trying to get people into the game, be as streamlined as possible, I did go for the bounce recycler that is just so important in the green Kurapika deck, right? You have the Orihime into the Ishada, so you get to on play, draw 1, discard 1, play the Orihime, bounce it back to your hand, play it again immediately, draw 1, discard 1, right? So you're able to fill up your graveyard that way a little bit more, but we are going to be a bit limited until we see things like the Rukia, or again, as the game progresses naturally. That's the other thing to think about with Bleach, right? Your life is always going to your trash. Those early blocks that you're taking are always going to your trash as well. And generally, you probably only need to filter for about 3 activations worth of cards. So even hitting like a single Rukia into some of the Ishida cycles will be enough to get you there for the extra cards that you need. That said, again, this is probably something that should be a 3 of, and then try to get another filter or get some extra draw triggers in here is probably ideal. But again, something I haven't had a chance to test because it was just such a dramatic change. Like, again, losing a good 2 energy was probably the biggest thing. Like, obviously the effect is really good, but the Orihime for the value it provided at 2 energy is, in my opinion, way more important than the Rukia fodder, even though it does feel bad to lose. But we will get more Rukia targets in Volume 2 of Bleach. And again, we already know that Bleach is still a tier 1 deck in Japan. So hopefully you've got kind of picked up on it that Bleach is going nowhere. I want to make that abundantly clear. It is still going to be a tier 1 deck. Now, we are going to talk about some concerns I have later on in the video about 2 other series that we're getting. But at least for now, Bleach is going nowhere. It's going to be extremely, extremely strong for this first month. However, we did get some other cards, and these are ones that are completely NA exclusive. So my first impression is, hey, NA exclusive cards. That is super hype. Like, this is stuff I want to see. And then they're just 4K vanillas, which feels kind of bad. But the reason for that is because we have a sealed format. And I hate that I have to go back to a lot of this conversation goes back to other Bandai games where we've seen limited take a focus and just not be as important or as strong. And it does feel like these 3 cards in particular were strictly added for the sake of, hey, we want to have sealed be an option. And it did help round out that experience. You are never playing these cards. They are never making the cut. It does not matter. Skip it. 0 out of 5 literally for constructed play. First sealed, yeah, cool. They fill the role and they're nice for that, which again, the pre-release events are sealed, so there is a point for it. I do want to at least give that credit, but for overall, it's not exciting for what we ended up getting, but it is very exciting to see that we are going to have some NA exclusive cards that could change later on for JJK, Code Geass, the other sets that we are getting. Maybe more so like Demon Slayer if we see some swaps, but at least for right now, Hunter x Hunter was a big one that we knew was getting 6 more cards, and we'll have to see how future sets might be changed. Now, that said, I do want to get into the other 3 cards that we got that actually have effects. And again, these were promo cards that were tied to special ticket events where it's like you go to an event, you try to acquire 5 wins, you get a promo, and the promos look sweet, by the way, the alternate versions of them. So it's nice to see that we have the base rarity here and also the alternate arts that will be appearing in the set. However, I am less than thrilled for the first couple. So Up first, we have the 1/1 Gon, which is going to give impact +1 or impact 1. And on paper, yes, specified slot, which it's called as the blue Hunter x Hunter archetype, other than the bomber deck, really needed some support. And if you saw my last video, there is a card called Blue Planet, which would have been so insane to get for the card to get buffed. Unfortunately, we didn't get it, and Blue Planet is a huge piece, so unfortunately, we have the Gon. Now, why do I hate this Gon? Well, for a lot of reasons, but let's break it down kind of piece by piece, right? So in the blue specified deck, I want to be very clear that the only raid we care about is Kilawa. So we don't have as much importance of getting a low-cost Gon into the deck to raid into. This is just a card that kind of sits by itself. So automatically not as important as some of the other choices that we have in the set. It is an active trigger, which is cool. It's only a 2k, which by the time that you're actually attacking with this into your opponent's 1 or 2 energy plays, it is going to be less than their 2500 or 3k blockers that they're going to have established. So even in your early game, it's going to be very difficult to just attack with this and line up the effect. So 2 strikes against it already. Third strike is that this requires itself to attack. And one of the other problems that you'll find with specified slot is it is very hard to get good enough cards and be able to reveal them without Blue Planet. So the deck was already weaker for that. And this is just another card that wants to play into that strategy. Now, it is when attacking can give impact +1, which means on impact, if you win the battle, if we had the Gon, for example, it would then deal 2 damage. Spoiler, people are just not going to block. I would rather take 1 damage than take 2 damage and lose a unit, right? So then we can say, oh, but then we have Kilawa. The raid target does get damage too. So it becomes like the green Hisoka that has either, you know, damage 2 or impact 2 damage 2 or impact 1 to get the damage that way. So they always have to block. However, this does require 4 or more. And then also it requires to attack. So you are attacking with a 2k character that doesn't have a easy way to get buffed, at least in the blue side. Yes, you have some removal cards, and maybe if you're way ahead, the 2k can at least threaten to remove one of their guys. Chances are that's almost never going to happen. So that is a grand total of 3 strikes. And as a final verdict, this did nothing, unfortunately, for the archetype to get better. Yes, this deck itself is very clunky to play. The consistency isn't always there. It can be very frustrating to play as well. But at least with Blue Planet, you are cycling itself and you have the ability to draw the extra card and get more specified slot cards into the deck that actually matter, that then pay off into the Kilawa or the Gon. So unfortunately, something that I'm just not excited for. It doesn't really go anywhere that we want it to, and ultimately is just going to be a really cool promo and nothing else. Moving into from there, we have the Kilawa for the Zoldak family, and this is another archetype. And this is basically the part where I really have to just pump the brakes, go back to what I was saying of your raid targets, they got to do something good or they got to cost 1 AP, right? So we have Illumi, which has the damage 2, which admittedly can be nice, and it has a very strong when play that you can potentially draw some cards. But then after that, it is just a 4K who has a very difficult time, admittedly, closing out the game without impact and with some otherwise questionable removal that's available to this archetype specifically. And it costs 5 energy, which does feel pretty bad for having a higher cost, both of these being 5 energy, in a deck that doesn't have a lot of good double energy. So that's like the small thing I will say. These get better as we go because the Kilawa does have double energy, and it doesn't have step properly, which is a mechanic in the game that says during the movement phase, if you have step and it's on your front line, it can go back to your energy line. But Kilawa has a way to get there and kind of cheat itself. So there are some turns where it's a 4K attacker. And as we know, attacking with 4K is the beautiful breaking point we all love. And then on the other hand, if you remove something of your opponent's, it can go back to the energy line and then give you that double energy that you need to go into your 2 raid targets. However, Illumi is definitely falls under par of where we want to be for a raid target. And then Papa is just an embarrassment, unfortunately, for what this card wants to be doing. It is 2 action points. It doesn't have raid, so you have to set up for it. It does have impact 1, which is nice, but then the snipe, which is great for removal, requires you to burn 2 cards. Card advantage is already so important in this game, and that effect is just not worth it. It's worth it in the sense that if you can combo it with the Illumi, right, then you're drawing the cards that way. But it is such a very specific setup that doesn't have any other lines available to it in the deck. It is going to feel very, very bad to play the majority of the time. So the turn before, you play the Sylvia to the back line, do your movement phase, and the next turn, you move it up so it can finally attack. Then you play the Illumi. You have to have then the Raid Fodder. You have to have the Illumi. Then you also have to have 2 more cards to discard to cycle into it. And this archetype doesn't really have a good graveyard recursion like we see out of some of the other purple decks that care about your graveyard. This is just more of play the board, play what's out of your hand. So it doesn't fill into that regard either way. So yes, this is very much you have to line up the perfect sequence to really get the value out of it. Or a lot of times this deck is just going to fall short, unfortunately. So for a final verdict of this one, it does make it a little better. Not much, but it does kind of at least fill a key role of wanting to get to 5 energy and admittedly struggling with that a little bit, and Kilawa can help us get there. So yes, kind of, but it's still something that this deck was already very poorly situated compared to the other decks that we have in our set 1, or I should say month 1 of the game, and then just didn't get better, unfortunately, with Volume 2. And then the last card I want to talk about, which admittedly, I totally read this card wrong the first time that I said. I thought it said if there is a other character with 5,000 or more BP on your field, he gains impact 1. So, well, this card is insane. By no doubt in my mind is this going to then buff up 2 very different archetypes. So the one I want to talk about first is actually the lesser known green Hunter x Hunter deck that is more about finding these lower curve Kurapika, Kilawa, and Gon that all have these like really cool BP manipulation strategies, and with Wing, who is just going to sit in your back line. And this is a deck that caps out at 4 energy, so you don't ever have to worry about double energy, which is its own really nice thing for this deck in particular. Now you have all these extra buffing effects to make sure that your characters can get that extra buffing value. And then you have stuff like Kilawa, who can then shrink something and then still attack because you buff it with Wing. So again, just a lot of really cool BP manipulations. And then you also have the other Raid Gon, which is going to pump your board even more. So this is like a really cool low to the ground. You have the 3 Gon that has impact. You can now give this Kurapika impact as well. So there's actually quite a few ways to close out this game and get multiple sources of impact that is going to just give you that extra range you need. So I really love this. I do think it's very nice. There is a more niche deck that we get in Volume 2 that says like, oh, if you have Kurapika, Kilawa, Leorio, and Gon, you get like special effects, and it's like, you know, the 4 of them all together finally, where they met up in the city, yada yada, that this Kurapika fits into very nicely. But what's actually insane then is my favorite deck, which again, openly admittedly biased because this is the deck that I have the most testing with, but now you're telling me that there are going to be sequences where I get to play Neon for 2 action points, go into the Kurapika, and then play the Emperor Time from my hand because the Neon gave me the 2 extra energy I needed, where now it is going to be a 6k, impact, snipe, and I'm drawing a card immediately. That is everything this deck wanted from a mid-game perspective, if in case your opponent gets like an early raid target that's really good and you can't quite get to 7 energy yet, because again, the raid 7 Kurapika is fantastic himself. So this Kurapika really gives you that early mid-game that you wanted and just was completely missing out on. And the downside now is there's too many Kurapikas to play in that deck. Like, this is another video that I'll do later on because this one's already going a little bit longer. But if you see my other videos where I reference the Kurapika deck list, I actually did a versus video with it, so you can go ahead and check that one out. But this does a lot for the Kurapika deck, at least in our early format. I want to be very clear. I think this does then get kicked down a notch once we get things like JJK and Code Geass. But this Kurapika deck, in the very isolated context of our 1-month meta, is very nice. And it's a very welcomed change that we're going to see to round out the meta a little bit better. So where does that leave us, right? So spoiler, we have a tier list here at the end. Woo! Maybe not a spoiler here is that this is actually the same exact tier list that I posted 4 months ago or wherever it was that was based on the Japan meta, because spoiler, Bleach is still very good. The one thing I did change is because of this Kurapika, I do think the Raid Kurapika and that green Gon deck probably go up about a half a tier, but I wasn't going to do about half tiers in this list. And the Bleach deck came down about half a tier. So that's where we have Kurapika and now some type of Bleach at the top end. I want to be very clear. I don't want to say that it's going to be guaranteed a Ichigo and Bakuya focus for Bleach, but something purple Bleach, once people get testing and refine the numbers, is 100% going to be there. Some of the other deck lists that we've talked about previously, Bomber, I love this deck, but it just has a little bit of a consistency issue, even though there are so many strong pieces in it, and it's my favorite deck to play from like a flavor standpoint in the 1 month meta. And then admittedly, I haven't played myself the yellow and green other Bleach decks, but everything that I could find from a tier list, Japan meta standpoint, both of these were consistently listed at tier 2, and some of them, you know, changed to be like 1.5 or tier 2.5 over time. I'm just listing them both as tier 2 there. And then, of course, the Gon, it was a unfortunately bad, like it probably is like tier 2.5 here, but just for the sake of where some of these other lists land, I wanted to make it a very clear kind of tier 3 from that standpoint. And then lastly, the probably don't play it tier other than like strictly locals and to try something new and have fun. I am going to put the other 4 decks that we have here at the bottom end here for. So again, I'm not going to say these are strictly like 1, 2, 3, 4, but there are noticeable differences within these tiers. So overall, going to your locals, and again, locals is all we have for the foreseeable future until we figure out what that, you know, big quarterly tournament is. Any of these 5 decks are good to play. Like, I would feel 100% confident recommending and telling people to play any of these 5 decks to go win your locals, get your winner promos, and again, have some fun with it, which is kind of cool to see because we have 4 different colors that are going to be viable effectively at launch. Now, the one thing I will say here at the end is this big idiot above me, huge elephant in the room. What are we going to do about JJK? And a little bit further on, by the same extension, is Code Geass. Bleach was the other deck that could hang with these 2 titles. However, if nothing changes with JJK or Code Geass, this entire tier list gets shifted down and it's just those 2 at the top, which is obviously not a great spot for us to be from a meta health standpoint. And then also, look, we got changes. All we know is that the pure card count is not changing for JJK, but that doesn't mean that they couldn't change a few cards around. So, Bandai, please, if you're watching this and listening, please do something for JJK and Code Geass. That is not just the restrictions. We need more than that since we've seen Bleach come down a notch to do something for the meta to make it a little bit more balanced. So that is my little 2 cents here at the end. So let me know your thoughts. I know a lot of people, you know, hopefully by now have calmed down a little bit. We got the knee-jerk reaction out of the way, but I promise you, put in the time, do some testing. Purple Bleach is still absolutely up there. And okay, let's say worst case scenario, Bleach comes down and it's just Kurapika standing alone on top. These are still all 5 decks that I would recommend playing and taking to your locals, and you will win an event with. So I want to be absolutely clear with that. And then also, while it's not confirmed yet, we are probably going to have the Union battles, or struggle battles, as they were called, for the Union rare cards that are going to be announced, I'm assuming next week in Dallas, hopefully, or I guess this week at the time of when this video will go live, but we have to see. And if that's the case, then you have to play the Bleach decks for the Bleach struggle battle. You have to play the Hunter x Hunter decks for the Hunter x Hunter battles. And spoiler, it is probably going to be still these 2 decks that are winning the struggle battles within each of those IPs. And of course, once JJK joins us in November, we'll talk about that a little bit more. So with that, that is my quick thoughts on the changes. I am overall very positive on it for what it could mean for the future of Union Arena, and only time will tell what happens with JJK and Code Geass. So until then, my friends, really looking forward to the Dallas announcements, but stay safe, stay hydrated, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.